Hi, good afternoon, everyone. In case you're wondering why there are two persons doing the keynote, we're not doing the crosstalk, 相声 in Chinese, okay? Don't worry, okay, that won't happen. But basically, because David has this idea about intelligence augmentation, and I have this idea about intelligent transformation. So I thought it's very good to actually string the two together to give you a complete story. So what David will be talking about is the importance of thinking about designing. How do you bring AI into education? And that needs a lot of thought and careful design. And I think in this conference, many people talk about the peril of integrating AI into education too early or in a different way. So I think today, David will be talking about teachers TPAC, TPAC with AI. I think our keynote speaker actually mentioned that this morning. And he'll be talking about three very important conditions here. That is the importance of using data to guide us in our decision-making and to give feedback to students, social technical infrastructure, as well as authentic context to apply that. And I will take over from there and talk about scaffolding versus performance scaffolding. So, David, please.
Good. Thanks, Seng Chee. Good afternoon to you all. It's amazing that at 4:45 you're still here. Yeah, okay. But this nothing beats when I'm in China. The teachers will sit from 8:30 to 6:30, and I'm still wondering why they're sitting there. Yeah, so it speaks to our generation and our ability to be attentive and endure through the day. I think the current generations and the attention spans are much lower. Yeah, so as Seng Chee mentioned, I will cover intelligence augmentation, and then Seng Chee will cover intelligent transformation. Okay, so things happen so fast with AI. I don't know how many of you use AI, to what extent. There was a time when ChatGPT came out, and I kind of used it every day. When I first used it, it was quite novel. I found it quite interesting. It's able to give me pretty decent stuff. But as I used it every day, I began to realize that marginal rate of utility decreases because I'm someone who loves to create knowledge, and yet ChatGPT basically doesn't give me anything too enlightening after a while. So as in all technological transformational and innovations, they peak in a height, and then they plateau after a while. So I just wanted to say this, as with this morning, that teachers are very critical in the educational process, and we are moving. Welcome to NIE. NIE is the place where we prepare teachers, and we not just prepare teachers for the current, but we prepare teachers for the future. With the age of AI, intelligent augmentation, transformation, how do we actually prepare teachers for the future? Because by the time the students graduate, 12 to 15 years later through schooling, the world probably is quite different from the time they started grade 1. So how do you actually solve a problem like that, right? Professor Gopinathan, the one that employed me into this place like 28 years ago, told me that sometimes in education, we have to change car tires while the car is still moving. Any idea? Only James Bond can do it. Yeah. Okay, so what do we do in an era where we have to prepare teachers and we are faced with technologies such as Gen AI, right? Many studies have come out. MIT is the most recent one that basically kind of studied what happens in the brain under different conditions through which essay writing is being done. I think it's all this morning we talked about it. But there are other studies warning the dangers for which if the task designs that we give students can readily be produced, in productivity forms and not learning ways, then cognitive declines seem to occur in those tasks. But of course, some kids are very smart. They just want to get over their homework, and then off they go. They do a lot of very interesting stuff. So we sometimes need to see a child's kid, not just from an instructional task point of view, but from a holistic point of view. So really, at the end of the day, we are using technology, such as AI, in order to enable our kids to be diligent, self-regulated, independent learners, all with a view to be able to learn, and to be able to be responsible citizens for society, including their own well-being. So when we do these things, we have to be very careful and understanding what educational outcomes are. Technology, industry, companies, Meta, AI, all these, they are probably racing far faster than what educational outcomes might be needful. Okay, so let us consider and think about these things even as we come here for 3 days. All right, what are things that we want our kids to learn? Right, you know, in the time of personalized learning, it's been around for like some time, and I wonder, are teachers still needed? After Gen AI, I conclude that teachers are ever more needed than ever, right? Especially in the younger years. Parents are very needed. Teachers, especially in the younger years, are very needed, not just for cognitive development, but especially for emotional development, right? There's this large study, 1,000 students across the entire US, the document's called Hand in Hand, and 19% of the students self-report that they have romantic relationships with ChatGPT. And these are grade 9 to grade 12 students. So if our kids are faced with all these technologies and they are using it just for instrumental purposes and for increasing social isolation, then you will have very, very interesting problems like emotional dysregulations. So my theory at the end of the day is I think teachers are more important than ever. But of course, teachers must be skilled in ways that catch up with the times. They must be able to use Gen AI most effectively for learning. I think Professor Patricia, I think, mentioned it this morning. I think basically she mentioned everything that I was about to say. All right. So, okay. So Chris Dede, one of my most admired people from Young, basically constructed this concept of intelligence augmentation, IA, rather than AI. So as we move into AI, I think we want to flip it around and ask ourselves, what is intelligence augmentation? So this is nothing new. If you think about what machines can do, they work overnight, they don't have to sleep, they crunch a lot of data for you. They do all the operational stuff, you know. Dede calls it reckoning. But humans are much better at situational awareness, judgment. But how does human judgment take place? Well, like knowledge building puts people into communities, into social settings like today, because there is a lot of implicit knowledge in human interactions. And not every implicit knowledge, I hope, can be codified. Because if every implicit knowledge can be codified, we are dead meat, man, right? We'll lose our jobs pretty soon. But I am pretty certain that there is intuition and implicit knowledge, judgment, that humans are good at. And so, how can we then augment human ability with the machine abilities that machines are so good in, reckoning, all right? So, I just want to say that it's hard to delve into this because education, unfortunately, in the past, because of our national high-stakes exams and things like that, very much focused on explicit knowledge. And interestingly, explicit knowledge can be codified. And what can be codified can be machinified. And what can be machinified, guys, you lose your jobs, right? So I think we need to be a lot more cognizant that today education must prepare humans for what human judgment is for, okay? So I happen to, my boss over there previously, now still my boss ever, she made me director of this Science of Learning Center, right? So in Science of Learning, we do neuroimaging, we capture physiological device, proxy sensors, and we try to understand what is beneath the surface, you know, from observable behavior. And in Science of Learning, we kind of figure out what happens in the brain, for example. So the MIT study resonates with me a lot. So can we measure judgment, for example, something not so explicit but also implicit? These are state-of-the-art things in the field, but we want to use different methods, different approaches and tools to be able to figure out what's important for preparing humans, preparing teachers, preparing students for the future. So we all know that there are biases in AI now. There's nothing new, right? And there are hallucinations and there are emotional dysregulations. So I just wanted to say that only a teacher like a parent, is able to mitigate these things, and I think the purpose of schooling is for that purpose, not just self-directed, personalized learning, because we assume that kids are very self-motivated to going online to learn everything in a personalized knowledge. That doesn't happen in the real world. A lot of kids are disengaged, right? A lot of kids have emotional, difficulties, especially in teenage years. How do we actually use the science of learning, understanding how learning occurs, how the brain functions, how emotions function from early years to adolescence to further in tertiary education and beyond? How do we know where are the windows of opportunity for which executive functioning, for example, is a window of opportunity, right? Especially like 3 to 5 years old, around the teenage years, executive functioning is blooming. And these are the times where we need to exercise the neural connections in their minds, like what was said this morning. So if you use ChatGPT in these windows of opportunity and they just deliver the assignments without the neural connections, we are losing opportunities. And I think brain literacy and science of learning literacy ought to be taught to teachers as soon as possible, even making students' brains visible. I was in Amsterdam just last week, and there was this growth mindset intervention, and they were doing brain imaging for the kids as they put in effortful learning. I thought they were measuring executive functioning. No, they were not. Kids were just trying to put effort in their studies, and then brain images are shown to the kids. Just by this simple imaging of showing them what happens in their own brains, make them more effortful in learning. And that is a very simple growth mindset intervention. Pretty powerful, right? So I was thinking I should come back and do something like that. So basically, we need to use all these tools together with teachers' abilities to design good instruction in a safe, simulated environment. Schools are simulations, for which we scaffold this simulation into participation in the real world gradually, and then to a way older kids and adults can co-determine knowledge and meanings with technology, with Gen AI, in an epistemic fashion, right? So I think we need to build these foundational literacies in kids, emotional literacies in kids, self-regulation in kids, self-directed learning in kids, and for human flourishing, early and in a staged and scientific way. All right, so many people talk about amplification, but I like this Deloitte definition. But I want to focus on augmentation, because it is technology that augments the human brain for decision and judgment, decision-making, and for making judgments. For me, the definition of amplification here is like when I get ChatGPT to help me fulfill a lot of administrative workload in NIE. So that amplifies my ability to complete the task so that I can do more academic thinking, right? But for me to do academic thinking or learning, I augment with technology in order to create new knowledge. I wish that we can do much more of this in schools. Of course, to automate has been something that we know in, you see driverless cars in the US and things like that. Now, why augmentation, right? Now, you know our children, different from my time, right? Our time, we will open the maps in the book and we will go navigate, places, and learn implicitly social awareness and geographical spatial awareness, right? Without GPS. My children these days, they go into the car, switch on the GPS, and they're not thinking anymore. The GPS says turn left, they turn left, turn right, they turn right, go straight, they go straight. And then my daughter would do it 20 times, and then after that I say, can you just fetch me there? Oh, let me switch on the GPS. I can't get there, although I've driven there 20 times. This is like using ChatGPT, right? With the early technology of GPS. So when we augment, we have to ask ourselves, what did we gain and what did we lose? And this is where schools come in, right? In Singapore schools, we don't let the kids use calculators too soon, right? Because we first want them to form their neural connections with mental arithmetic. Then over time, the calculators come in. Then the kids are able to perform both without the calculator and then with the calculator, right? So it's the same for the GPS, right? So unfortunately, the sequencing, fortunately, the sequencing is important, right? So again, in education, we have to ask ourselves, what did we gain in terms of educational goals, instructional objectives, and what did we lose every time we introduce a technology? And some point in the curriculum, we have to compensate for what we lost, so that by the time they graduate from schools, they are holistic in their being educated. Right, that's my personal view, okay? But things are changing so fast, curriculum structures do not morph so easily, and we need to figure this thing out sooner than later. Right, so we all heard about zone of proximal development this morning, and basically the teacher is the one that mediates between the individual and the environment including all the curricular demands, assessment demands that students need to do, and the teacher is the one that mediates between the learner and the environment, right? So there is the human in the loop both for the learner and the human in the loop also for the teacher, right? Let me hasten. So the teacher, as far as preparing for the future, and I do not know what's after Gen AI and what is after Gen AI, but really the teacher must be good at technological, pedagogical content knowledge, right? And AI is more than just mere technology, right? And the teacher must be good in all these three circles that you see there, but I argue that the science of learning, literacy, must be superimposed on this entire understanding. Now, teachers are very busy people. This whole list looks very scary, but we all know that teachers are quite good at some of these things, but on top of that, they need to know what AI can do these days in terms of all the literacies that are needed around the black box. And we also need to have data-informed use, and teachers need to know what data science is about these days. And I argue that measures of cognition, emotion, and regulation is something that's critical for teachers going forward. Perhaps we can't do all that in pre-service training education, but we should be able to string it out in both pre-service and in-service. Okay, so this is an example. With Gen AI now, I argue that we need a lot more embodied learning and not just classroom-type learning. Because classroom-type explicit learning, knowledge, is the expertise of explicit knowledge and machines. So we want to get students embodied, especially in the younger years. Concrete experiences, concrete manipulatives help form the young brain in the early years. So this is an example of how NIE researchers work with Science Center and with counselors in social service agencies coming together to help a group of low progressing students in scientific inquiry, right? In a very embodied way, these kids were able to perform those scientific concepts, but through an embodied experience. Maybe it took more time than curriculum time, but they were able to remember the kinds of scientific concepts even 6 months after the intervention when I went to interview the kids. So these kids can learn. It's that sometimes they need to learn in ways a bit different from the very abstracted forms of learning. And this is an example where we did interventions in schools where teacher learning was very much a part and parcel of it, and really it was a totally revamp of the kinds of classroom discourse that took place. And then what happened is, importantly, the kinds of lessons and the curriculum and timetabling structures of the schools had to be changed, right, in order to fit this kind of inquiry-based approach, right? Now, what would need to take place? So this is a cluster school approach where different teachers from different schools came together and designed the lessons, and they supported one another in the implementation. Importantly, each of the pairs of teachers went back to their own schools, and they worked with their school leaders, their heads of departments, in order to find a structure that can contain, is not a good word, contain the intervention. Right? And then school leaders need to rework the, I call it, socio-technological infrastructures, curriculum assessments, in order to sustain such inquiry-based approaches. To me, these are challenging school changes that are needed, especially in the era of Gen AI. So there are three things that are important for change if we want to situate schools for the future of education. One is access and opportunities to these things. There must be parity and equity. Second, teachers must have the AITPCK with science of learning understanding. Number three, the socio-technical infrastructures need to adapt and change accordingly. Right, so to this end, teachers must develop some degrees of adaptive expertise or cognitive flexibility. All right, I think I shouldn't talk too much because Seng Chee is supposed to come on, but we need to get teachers to be able to manage students' learning not just in formal settings in classrooms, but outside the classrooms in synergistic ways, differentiating the different types of learners, and with the transformed socio-technical infrastructures that schools are advantaged to provide. Now, should I bore you with this? No. I can go for another half an hour on this, okay? So we have been working onto the science behind cognitive flexibility and how students and teachers can make judgment calls with respect to strategy flexibility. So, you know, in our cognitive flexibility work, we create challenging tasks for students to do, and in this case, teachers too, if the whole classroom is a challenging situation. And we allow students to explore and fail, because it is in the exploring and failing process that their neuronal connections are being formed, and we delay the feedback given to them intentionally. You know, teachers giving feedback too early is like getting answers from ChatGPT. But in our culture, we are very prone to giving feedback because feedback is good, right? No, we need to allow the students to explore, work it out, those conceptual schematas. And then this process allows them to develop human judgment, strategies that they can then apply differently in different contexts. We call this strategy flexibility. And we have neuronal substrates to be able to measure this. Okay, so we're trying to implement this work now amongst teachers. All right, so this is an example of getting students to come to NIE. Why come to NIE? Because some of these socio-technical infrastructures do not exist in schools. Right? So these kids are DIY from the Internet of Things. They began to, my colleague Kenneth Lim, basically got students to build their own EEG DIY, and then from their DIY, whether or not it's very professionally accurate, the data is captured, and then these kids in their projects seek the advice of NIE professors as far as how to interpret the data. And they're learning science and math in a very applied way. Right? So these are new socio-technical infrastructures that do not yet exist in schools. Now, importantly, how to sustain such efforts, because we're always short of manpower, right? The older people here are NTU elective students. So my very clever colleague took students from schools, made them work together with NTU elective students. NTU elective students became mentors for these school students. And 2 years later, I saw these NTU elective students volunteering their work in Singapore secondary schools, doing about the same thing. Right. This is a transformed socio-technical infrastructure, connecting the dots of the different programs that exist and allowing for student volunteerism in their work, right, to schools. Right, so just to conclude, teachers are designers, enablers, and facilitators. Imagine this skill of teachers internalized into the individual. Then the individuals become their own designers and facilitators of their own lifelong learning. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? So students become teachers to themselves responsibly in the use of Gen AI, internalizing the good modeling that teachers do, Vygotskian basic foundations. Right? Okay, so in a nutshell, I call this intelligence augmentation, and we really need to solve serious issues that are coming our way, not just issues of emotional dysregulation or cognitive declines, we really need to help our kids be prepared as human beings for the future. Otherwise, the machines will take over us, right? So I think schools play a large role, and we should not just do schooling to prepare the what is, but we need to do schooling to prepare for what if situations going forward. All right, let me pass the time to my colleague.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to now talk about this intelligent transformation to intelligence augmentation to intelligent transformation for knowledge building. Now, if you forget everything we talk about today, don't forget this slide. Okay. So I've been trying to search for answers, and in knowledge building, we do a lot of rise birth. And the answer came last week when I talked to Dragan Gasevec. So basically, what his theory is that there are a lot of here high AI-empowered skills. So we use AI to augment human intelligence. And if we do that too often, people start to delegate their cognitive thinking, metacognitive thinking, to the machine. And they might have the illusion that they have learned, but they may not have. They might not have. So what we're trying to do here is we need to scaffold learning here. So learning is quite different from machine-supported performance. So performance, learning. So this is an intentional process that we need to get students, learners from low skills to high human skills, and there's the scaffolding for learning. Okay? You can use AI to scaffold, but that process, so scaffolds needs to be removed in order for the learners to demonstrate that they have developed the competencies at some point in time. Now, this morning, you might have heard Philip Dawson talking about reverse scaffolding, right? So that is when the human develop the skills, and then put back the scaffolding that they can now perform at a very high efficiency, high effective stage, when together with the machine, they can do a lot more. So I think this is actually a very, very clear explanation for myself. I'm not quite sure about you. So intelligent transformation means that we need to do the augmentation, but with intentional scaffolding for learning before we move then to this part here with human AI-empowered performance. So with that in mind, so David talked about this slides. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to actually contextualize using knowledge building example. So basically, students embodied learning in knowledge building environment, and teacher developed that TPAC skills in order to be able to use the environment to scaffold students' learning. Okay, so basically, let me just summarize knowledge building in one slide. Okay, so basically, knowledge building involves students asking questions to tackle authentic problems. And that is actually a very important starting point. There was a questions about students' motivation. And this is actually a very key point here because students, if you just give a lecture right away, okay, they might be thinking, why am I learning this? So I just want to do schools, pass the assignment, pass the test, and then get a degree. But if students come up with their own questions, a lot of time they'll be very motivated to want to find out the answers, and they'll be very motivated to help each other to collectively improve the answers. So students ask authentic questions, they then create the ideas. These ideas can be from the textbook, okay, can be from the internet, can be from the AI, but very importantly, they need to then share, connect, improved ideas in a digital platform. This is when they start questioning one another. Okay, you can copy from the internet, but your peers might be asking you, what do you mean by this? Okay, you can use AI answers, but your peers will be asking you, what do you mean by this? So you need to be able to defend and answer your questions. And then this is actually a very important step here. A lot of times when we discussion, the ideas just go horizontal. There are a lot of ideas, but it's horizontally developed. So we want the students to be able to revisit the ideas and to do the rise and birth, where you integrate ideas again together, and then think about better ideas to represent these horizontal ideas. And these better ideas can be in terms of theory or principles. And we use digital platform that my colleague has shared with you, and these are very important platforms to support knowledge building. So David talked about social technical infrastructure, and this is very important social technical infrastructure. Now, how do we scaffold the students' learning before we put in the AI? one of the things that my colleagues have been doing is actually to build the culture of knowledge building first, before using technology, before using knowledge forum, before using AI. And what they did is basically use simple post-it pad. And when you use post-it pad, students can see the ideas, they can group the ideas together, they can start thinking about, oh, this process is so interesting because I can see my friend's ideas so different from mine. And I want to look for similar ideas to group them together. I want to look for different ideas that I can then compare and contrast. And so building that culture first before they move to this digital platform. And why this digital platform is important is because this is a point where they can then share the ideas, but also record the ideas across time. And because they record the ideas across time, they can then do the rise above after that. Okay? I won't talk about analytics here. That will take me another day. So, but one question is about knowledge building facilitation. And this is actually something very challenging for teachers because knowledge building is not something you do stepwise. Step 1, you do this. Step 2, you do this. Step 3, you do this. No. But knowledge building requires the teachers to be able to use the principles to guide the students. So using principles to guide students, meaning that I must be able to observe what is happening in my class, to understand what is happening in my class. So let's say my students are giving a lot of ideas, but similar ideas. That means they do not have idea diversity. Then I think about, what can I do to encourage more diverse ideas? Okay? When my students are having diverse ideas, but they're not synthesizing them, then I talk about rise above. How do I make my next move to nudge the students to rise above? And this is the part where David talked about cognitive flexibility. And this requires a lot of cognitive flexibility to be able to do this well. Okay, so, oops, what am I doing? Oops. Okay. So, AITPAC, this is the time that I'm going to shamelessly repeat this again. So this is the framework I came up with, learning from, learning with, learning about, and learning beyond AI. And I think this is a very important framework that we need to think about. So a lot of times when we use AI in teaching and learning, we think about using AI as a personalized tutor. Learning from AI in the sense of using AI as a tutor or to aggregate information. But this is only one perspective of learning. Learning is acquiring knowledge. Okay? And if we stick with this perspective of learning, we'll be out of job because now AI can do it much better than us. Okay? But never mind, you can still do this. Okay, but what is important is that you need to know that if you want to do this, you need to know how to select the correct AI model, safety, privacy issue, accuracy issue, AI hallucination issue, and how do you put in the instructional strategies in your design of personalized learning. But what is beyond learning from AI? What is beyond learning as acquiring knowledge? Learning as participation. And this is when human-human interactions is very important. And learning as participation means that we talk, we share ideas, okay? And in knowledge building case, the students actually spend a lot of time talking to one another, sharing ideas. And this is a very important process. And this is a time when we start to gain expertise and deepen our understanding of a particular topic. And notice I put down here human-human AI collaboration. It's not just human AI collaboration, but human-human AI collaboration. And that's very important because we don't want to take away the human-human interactions, and we don't want to take away that metacognition and cognition from the human. And so you can use AI as idea generation partner. You can use it as a dialogic partner. You can use AI to actually prompt the learners to think about something deeper, metacognition, and use AI to orchestrate learning, putting students in different groups, searching for ideas, searching for different ideas. And learning about AI, I think many people talk about this. Okay, so how AI works, okay, how to use AI effectively, what are the pitfalls, what are the realistic expectations of AI. And learning beyond AI is very important, and this is actually from the view of learning through knowledge building, learning through knowledge creation. And this is very important because I think I mentioned about scaffolding. So you must be able to do this. David, can you use this pointer? Okay. So you must be able to remove the scaffold and students are able to perform something, and that's true learning. And also, very importantly, develop the knowledge creation capacities of students. Okay. like what David said, after a while, the ChatGPT just gives you the same answers over and over again, right? And also, there are certain aspects of learning that cannot be replaced by AI. Of course, some argue it can be done. Social emotional learning, values, and character. So with AIT pack in place, and there are two layers here. Students learn from, learn with, learn about, and learn beyond AI. And teachers also learn with, learn about, learn from, learn beyond AI. And that happens both ways. So students, instructor, it can apply to both. And I would like to give you further examples of knowledge building that my colleagues have actually elaborated a lot. So this particular example is when we put the students, bring the students to NTU here and to explore the NTU Beautiful Garden. If you have not explored that, okay, please try after this. So they explore the beautiful NTU Garden, and then they try to learn topics about sustainability. And what we do here is actually have a chatbot to support the students in learning sustainability. So this is called Kailin. The developer is here. YY is sitting there in the middle. So what this chatbot can do is actually, it's a multimodal chatbot using Gemini. Students can take a photo. I can see over here, this is a waterfall in the NTU garden. Okay, there's a waterfall in NTU. If you put this picture into the chatbot, I can tell you what are the important sustainability concept. Okay, and that helps to speed up students' understanding about sustainability. And very importantly, the next step is important. You can see over the photos here, they observe the garden, they learn with ChatGPT, okay? But very importantly, you want them to learn with one another. That's the human-human interactions, okay? And it starts to bring the ideas together, and they think about an authentic problem to solve. In this particular case, the students felt that the water is muddy, and they think that it's not good for the fishes. So they want to develop filter systems to filter the water. And so they come together, and they design something, model to help to do that. And this is an example where David talked about using data to inform learning, and this is my colleague Julie have done a lot of all this work, collecting data when students are actually engaged in discussion. And from this data, we can know the students' emotional engagement, students' talk, and students' physiological data as well. And this is another example of using AI to support teachers' learning. And in this particular case, we use Knowledge Building Learning Companion for Teachers, or in short, KBLCT. And what this chatbot can do is actually to teach the teachers about knowledge building principles. Okay, that's level 1. Okay, level 2, they can co-design lessons with the teachers. And I actually observed one example in which the teachers actually have this chatbot turned on for 3 days. Okay, I know it's 3 days because I checked the date. Okay, and there was like 100 overturns. And this is so interesting dialogue because the chatbot asked the teachers, okay, so how about thinking about this? Teachers will give the chatbot the answers, and then the chatbot say, oh, that's a very nice idea, but why do you do this? Okay, how about this? And it just went on and on for 3 days, and the teachers then designed the lesson. Okay, but she didn't just take everything from the chatbot. She actually recontextualized it in her own classroom, taking with her the experience that she had with her students, combined with what the chatbot gave her, and then come up with a lesson design. And very importantly, Dr. Teo here also designed this, what she called the home of KB, Human Computer Community Exploration of Knowledge Building. So if you notice here, the chatbot is here. So we let the teachers interact with the chatbot, get some ideas about lesson design, okay, individual reflection on knowledge forum, but we want the teachers to come together without the chatbot. So they learn from the chatbot, they come together, then they talk about their lesson designs that they have gathered from the chatbot, interaction with the chatbot. They then interact with the knowledge building lead teachers to improve their lesson design. They went back to implement the lesson design. Then after that, they go back to the chatbot again to ask for, how do I improve my lessons? This is what happened. Okay, there are some issues here. How do I improve my lessons? So in this way, I put AI in the loop because teachers actually directed this whole process. Not human in the loop, but AI in the loop. So we want to give back the agency to the human teachers. So in short, with this example, we hope to illustrate to you that teachers and students, okay, can both develop this cognitive flexibility through knowledge building learning environment, and teachers as designers, enablers, and facilitators in this process. And too early to thank you. Sorry. Okay. And very importantly, yeah. So we have this AIT pack, science of learning data, social technical infrastructure. So we talk about learning from, learning with, learning about, and learning beyond AIT pack. We talk about science of learning data to help the teachers to be able to advise the students and for students to be able to improve their understanding. And we have these parallel layers of knowledge building for both the students and teachers. With that, thank you very much.